There's one thing that strikes the traveller the moment he or she crosses the border into Cornwall. This land is different. This presentation of picturesque images, from the northern border to the tip of Land's End, gives just a flavour of the many delights to be experienced by the visitor to this delectable duchy. Surrounded on three sides by the sea, and almost cut off from England with the natural border formed by the River Tamar, Cornwall sports 270 miles of the most beautiful coastline in the world. Small wonder, therefore, that on this narrow peninsula, many of the scenes incorporate some view of water in one form or another, be it creek, river, lake, or ocean. Many visitors travel to Cornwall solely for the sun and fun of the coasts and coves, little realizing perhaps the wealth of interest and history that is contained within the Celtic countryside. Down here are the legends of King Arthur, of mermaids and witches, pixies and pirates, smugglers and wreckers. Historical churches and tin mines dot the countryside. There are fairy tale castles and signs of habitation from before history began. There are theme parks and exhibitions, subtropical gardens, and sports ranging from surfing to sailing, golf courses, bowling greens, to pony trekking or hiking. So this is Cornwall. Sit back and reflect on the places you remember, or plan a visit to the parts you haven't yet seen. Of all the routes into Cornwall, probably the most important, certainly in bygone days, is the road now designated the A30, which until quite recently passed through the ancient town of Launceston. Launceston remains today the chief town of the district, which some say is the original meaning of the name. The town is dominated by the castle, the best preserved part of which is the keep, with its magnificent views around North Cornwall and across into Devon. Southgate Arch is all that remains of the 12th century walls which used to surround the town, a mark of its importance in the area, and the only walled town in Cornwall. The White Hart was the old coaching house for travellers en route to Penzance, and its 12th century door is a remnant from the town's once powerful priory. Market Square boasts an attractive collection of 17th and 18th century shops. And from here, it's just a short walk to the parish church of St. Mary Magdalene, with its unique, intricate carvings in the granite stonework. At the bottom of the very steep hill to the north of the town is the delightful little River Kenzie, spanned by the 18th century road bridge. Just upstream from the road is the medieval Priory footbridge, only 4 feet wide, and once used by the monks from the adjacent priory, near the site of which now stands St. Thomas's Church. Another route into the county along the A39 from North Devon leads the visitor directly to our most northerly major resort of BUDE. Originally developed as a seaport, with the canal running 10 miles inland, it became famous in Victorian times for its fine beaches. The course of the canal was converted in the late 19th century to provide a railway, which itself has now become disused, and only about 1.5 miles of the original canal remain navigable. This area remains popular with those who prefer a quieter, more restful holiday. Even in the height of the holiday season, this part of Cornwall is still open and not overly crowded. The gently shelving beaches provide safe swimming for everyone except for extreme low water, when the Atlantic recedes a long way from the cliffs. Even then, there are conveniently swimming pools among the rocks which provide ample fun for the youngsters. And a choice of beaches, Summerlees, and a short walk across Summerlees Downs, Crooklets. The remaining part of the canal now provides a useful recreational facility, with boats to hire for a paddle about on the water. Here there are pleasant walks to enjoy along the banks, and sheltered spots from which to fish. Swans and ducks delight the really young, and many a picnic lunch has found its way through their ever-grateful beaks. The main street is the Strand along the north bank of the River Neat, and between the river and canal is the castle, a folly built in the 19th century by Sir Goldsworthy Gurney. Situated a little further south along the coast, and approached by steep, narrow roads, is the miniature harbour of Crackington Haven. This picturesque place lies within a stretch of cliffs owned by the National Trust, whose unspoilt beauty make this a spot well worthy of a visit. South along the Tamar, we find what is nowadays probably the busiest route into the county, along the A38 from Exeter and across the Tamar Suspension Bridge. This vista of Saltash and the river is probably the most common first view that visitors have of Cornwall. And what a majestic sight it is, with a suspension bridge carrying the road traffic, parallel to which is the rail bridge, which has become one of the monuments to Isambard Kingdom Brunel. An older crossing of the Tamar is that provided by the ferries at Tor Point. Until the road bridge was completed in 1961, this was the only crossing direct from the city of Plymouth. The ferries are still in use today. Held on course by their chains, they continue to ply back and forth, carrying commuters and trippers between Plymouth and Tor Point. Looe and Polperro are names familiar to virtually every visitor to Cornwall. Looe is actually two towns which straddle the river and are connected by a road bridge. Houses climb the steep slopes on either side. In the evenings, East Looe is bathed in golden sunlight, while West Looe gets its fair share in the mornings. This was an important port during the Middle Ages and Tudor times, supplying ships for the major sea battles, including that against the Armada in 1588. Still a working fishing port today, it's probably best known now as the Mecca for deep-sea shark fishing. Just along the coast is the magical little harbour of Polperro, probably the most photographed haven in Britain. Understandable when one sees the cottages nestling together in the hill, overlooking the activities in the harbour, and the gaily coloured fishing boats with their reflections on the water. Polperro has not always been so innocent as it now appears, and at one time it was in so much use for smuggling that it became necessary to station customs men in the harbour in an attempt to cut down on the trade. It used to be so isolated that supplies had to be brought in by sea, the steep roads being unsuitable for the carriage of goods. Today, the approach roads are improved, but the streets remain narrow and unsuitable for motor traffic. The town is closed to motorists during the summer season, and visitors have to travel about a mile from the car parks. It's a pleasant walk down the hill, but for those who are unable to make the walk, there are horse-drawn carriages and mini taxis available for hire. Certainly worth considering to save the hike back up later on. When the weather's a bit dull, or when the kids just need a change from the beach, this area has one of Cornwall's major theme parks at DOEWALLS. In addition to plenty of activity playgrounds and adventure trails amongst the trees, DOEWALLS' main theme is the narrow gauge railways. If it's a quiet walk that you fancy, then just up the road is the tranquil setting of Goliatha Falls. It's not too easily found, but well worth the searching for. Here you can stroll through the woods, or just sit on the banks and watch the water tinkle by. Having moved inland, we're now on the edge of Bodmin Moor. Walks on the moors are for the more serious hiker with the proper clothing and equipment. It's not unusual for a mist to come down and all sense of direction can be lost. Here, shrouded in mist, it's easy to conjure up images of old smugglers bearing their contraband spirits in the peat bogs. And nearby is their old local, the Jamaica Inn at Bolventor, a name quite familiar to most people, since the late Daphne du Maurier wrote her book of the same name. Not far away is the mysterious Dosmary Pool, where it is said that Sir Bedivere cast King Arthur's sword Excalibur out into the lake. and an arm clad in white reached up and caught it. The legend of King Arthur is centred around Tintagel, where there are the ruins of an old castle set majestically atop the cliffs of the Atlantic coast. At the base of the cliffs are the caves, one of which could be the one used by Merlin the magician. Is this hall of chivalry where Arthur and his knights sat at the round table? And could this be where they bought their gifts when they set out to woo the local maidens? Of course, it's only a legend. Or is it? Not only knights apparently frequent this area. On one of the roads into Tintagel, you'll come across this quaint little pixie cottage. These delightful little chappies are very popular as souvenirs, and many have now emigrated to holiday gnomes up country. Boscastle is owned by the National Trust, which ensures that its natural charm will be preserved for others to enjoy in years to come. There's a trust shop for both souvenirs and local information, and another pixie house full of fascinating characters. For just a few pounds they will grace the garden and guard the goldfish in the ponds back home. Unusually for Cornish harbours, it isn't possible to look directly out to sea due to the S-shaped channel through the cliffs. This channel, with its jagged rocks on either side, made it a particularly tricky entrance for ships. They were usually helped into port by other vessels, and with thick tow ropes to the shore. A narrow path has been built along the north side of the harbour to allow pedestrians to view the entrance. The outer harbour wall was destroyed by a mine during the war. It has since been rebuilt using granite blocks and provides shelter from the full force of Atlantic storms. About 10 miles southwest is another typical little Cornish harbour at Port Isaac. No tourist trappings here, but a part of real old Cornwall, with working fishing boats and fish processing cellars sharing space with the local lifeboat. The narrow streets allow little room for motor cars, being more suited to the pony and trap of earlier days. Motorists are advised to park at the top of the hill and walk down into the port, although at low tide the harbour doubles as a makeshift car park, complete of course with attendants collecting a modest fee for the privilege. To get west of the Camel estuary, it's necessary to move inland some miles to the crossing at Wadebridge. Here we find the longest bridge in Cornwall. Built in the 15th century, it had 17 Gothic arches, with pedestrian refuges in the piers. It used to span 510 feet, but due to the silting up of the estuary, there's now only 320 feet between the banks. Nearby is the parish church of Egleshale. It was built at about the same time as the bridge. The interior is rugged with no plaster on the walls, and on either side of the south porch can be seen 2 Celtic crosses. With fine golden sand and a stream in which small children can happily play, Trevone is typical of the many small coves on the north coast. With a car park for the motorist, this beach offers everything for the family who want a quiet day at the seaside. There's ample opportunity to explore the rocks and pools at low tide, and fine views across the bay to TREVOSE Head, which juts out into the Atlantic. Once again, it's safe to swim at all stages of the tide, provided that the areas close to the rocks are avoided. When the surf is up, board riding is a popular sport. The port of Padstow was once important as a transatlantic passenger port, as well as a major centre for fishing. Situated on the south bank of the Camel River, the size of vessels which can enter the estuary is limited by the Doom Bar at the seaward end. While fishing is still carried on from the port, nowadays the principal industry is in catering to the tourists. Pleasure and fishing trips are available from the harbour, and there are many points of interest to visit within the town itself. Padstow is famous for its Obios celebrations, which take place on the 1st of May each year. This old pagan festival marks the end of winter, winter being represented by the os, or horse. Preceded by the teaser, the os and townsfolk dance around a maypole in Market Square. Everyone joins in the fun, and a good day is had by all, but there are usually some sore heads the next morning. Once named Petrockstow, this is where St. Petrock landed from Ireland in the 6th century, before moving inland to Bodmin. The Church of St. Petrock here in Bodmin is the largest church in Cornwall. It was built in the 15th century on the site of an earlier Norman church, and contains the superb Norman font on which many of the others in Cornwall are based. In the glass case of the south wall are the remains of St. Petrock himself. They were stolen by a monk in the 12th century, but were brought back from Brittany and are now displayed here in their rare Italian casket. Flags of many battles hang in the north aisle, evidence of Bodmin's associations with the army, and in particular the Duke of Cornwall's light infantry. Just to the north of Bodmin is the small local airfield from where it's possible to take scenic flights to either coast. Towards the south coast, Restormel Castle sits atop a hill, just north of the town of Lostwithiel, a mainly 13th century castle that was the site of a major battle between the Roundheads and Cavaliers in 1644. Nearby is the magnificent Lanhydrock House. Set in acres of parkland, it was donated to the National Trust in 1953. The beautiful formal gardens were laid out by Sir George Scott in 1857 and maintained to perfection today. Most of the original house was destroyed by fire in 1881 and rebuilt in the same local granite. Fortunately, part of the north wing survived, and a 17th century plaster ceiling remains in the gallery with its Old Testament scenes. To the south, along the River Fowey, we find the ancient town of Lostwithiel with the unusual octagonal spire of St. Bartholomew's Church, and the 700-year-old bridge with its 9 arches and angular recesses for pedestrians. A new road bridge was built in 1939, about a quarter of a mile up the valley. Following the course of the river, we eventually come to Fowey, often mispronounced by visitors to these parts. With a long and eventful nautical history, this was the assembly point of the Fowey gallants in 1346, when 770 men and 47 ships were sent by Edward III to lay siege to Calais. Extremely popular as a centre for sailing today, it's possible to hire boats to explore the lower reaches of the river and creeks, or take advantage of one of the angling trips that are on offer. Fowey is not only a pleasure port, and you may be lucky enough to see one of the ocean-going cargo ships being turned in the harbour, before being manoeuvred upstream to the jetties, where the china clay is loaded. The clay is mined from the area to the north of St Austell, being washed out of the decomposed granite by high-pressure water monitors. The workings have the appearance of a lunar landscape, until they eventually grow over and return to nature. One of the most visible features of the area are the White Mountains, produced by the granite gravel which is washed out by the process. The WHEAL Martin Museum near St Austell gives a fascinating and memorable insight into this important Cornish industry. The clay is also exported from smaller harbours like Parr and the privately owned port of Charlestown. The port was developed in 1791, and the visitor centre tells in much detail the history of the Cornish coastline and of the many harbours and wrecks. Flanking Charlestown are the beaches of Carlisle Bay with its mile of silver sands to the east, and this delightful cove at Porthpean to the south. Between here and Dodman Point are a further selection of fine beaches like those at Pentuan, Portmelon and GORRAN Haven, and the enchanting old fishing harbour at MEVAGISSEY. Here, commercial and pleasure fishing live happily side by side. And if you're not taking a trip yourself, there are seats around the inner harbour where you can just sit and watch the bustle of this busy little port. A walk around the maze of narrow streets will transport you back in time to when pilchard fishing and smuggling were the principal activities of the local inhabitants. The beautiful Luxullian Valley is along the route of the Parr to Newquay railway line. It's spanned by the Trefry viaduct, which used to carry a canal and railway from the Trefry granite quarries. During the summer there are pleasant walks through the trees, but it's especially beautiful during the spring, when bluebells carpet the hedges and banks of the river. Moving back up towards the north coast, we find yet another attraction owned by the National Trust. The old manor house at Trerice belonged to the Arundel family for over 4 centuries. It was rebuilt by Sir John Arundel in 1572, though part of the older house survives in the south wing. If you're staying in this part of Cornwall, and the weather's a bit dull, or you just want a change from the beach, this is just the place for a day out with a difference. For impressive coastal scenery, the views at BEDRUTHAN steps are difficult to beat. To the north, TREVOSE Head can be seen across the nearer Park Head, while to the south, Watergate Bay stretches away to Town Head off Newquay. Newquay is undoubtedly the most popular resort in the whole of Cornwall. Situated midway down the North Cornish coast, it serves as an ideal centre for those who wish to visit all the other parts of the county. The main reason for its popularity, however, are the finest coastline and beaches in all of Europe. There are 7 beaches altogether, stretching from CRANTOCK in the west to Morgan Porth in the east, including the harbour with its sheltered moorings for the fishing and pleasure boats. Nowadays, it's a fine playground for the children, with its own beach and safe swimming when the tide is in. Renowned as the surfing centre of Britain, the World Surfing Championships were held here at Fistral in 1989, as were the Surf Ski Championships. Probably the most popular beach is Towin, which is close to the town and features Newquay's Island, with its swimming pool for the younger members of the family built into the rocks at the base. With its carnival-like atmosphere, Newquay is most popular with the younger set, and there's plenty to do without ever visiting the beach, and a lively nightlife of discotheques, theatre and cabaret. On the outskirts of the town are the beautiful Trenance Gardens, under the impressive viaduct which carries the railway line into Newquay Station. Here you'll find the zoo with its collections of exotic and domestic animals, set in 8 acres of landscape gardens, while nearby are tennis courts and one of the town's bowling greens. Trenance Gardens are maintained with a variety of delightful blooms throughout the year, a pleasant area to just sit and relax, or stroll among the colourful flower beds set against the green of the lawns. For the more energetic, there's the boating lake with its paddle boats. Good exercise for the kids while Mum and Dad relax in the back. To the south of Newquay are many delightful villages, of which CRANTOCK is only one. As in all parts of Cornwall, it pays to get off the main roads to appreciate the real beauty of the countryside, with the added benefit of missing most of the heavy traffic. Another popular beach for the surfers is Perranporth, with its 3 miles of golden sands, and the conspicuous Chapel Rock, which affords an adventure playground for the children, with a swimming pool just one of the attractions among its rocks. Perranporth is named after St. Piran, the patron saint of Cornwall, who, it is said, floated across from Ireland on a millstone in the 6th century. The 5th of March is St. Piran's Day, widely celebrated as Cornwall's national day, and it's the white St. Piran's cross on a black background which forms the national flag. As well as the administrative capital of Cornwall, Truro is without doubt the finest shopping centre in the county. If the weather's dull, shoppers flock here from all parts of Cornwall, and you'll need to exercise some patience at such times in finding a parking space. The spires of Cornwall's only cathedral dominate the skyline, and thousands of people visit the cathedral every year. Also recommended is a visit to the County Museum located in River Street. There are several beautiful parks to enjoy, fine for a quiet stroll. And if you're really patient, you may see some of the elusive wildlife which abounds in these havens in the centre of the city. Located at Phoenix Wharf at the head of the Truro River is Radio Cornwall. When the tide is in, river trips are available from here to Falmouth. At low tide it's necessary to travel down to Malpas for the boat trips, where the Truro River is joined by the tributary from Tresillian, allowing sufficient water at all stages of the tide. To get to the Roseland Peninsula from Truro, it's possible to take the circuitous but picturesque route around Tresillian and down through Tregony, or the shorter and equally scenic route via Playing Place to the south and across the King Harry Ferry. The very name of Roseland conjures up images of loveliness, and you won't be disappointed at the attractiveness of this quiet backwater of Cornwall. One place that begs to be visited is the exquisite little church of St. JUST-IN-ROSELAND, with its superb setting on the wooded slopes of the creek. The surrounding palm trees evidence of the gentle nature of the local climate. St. Mawes is the peninsular's centre for sailing, and from here a passenger ferry regularly crosses Carrick Roads to Falmouth. The castle was built in the 16th century by King Henry VIII, and together with the larger Pendennis castle at Falmouth, stood guard over the entrance to Carrick Roads. Nowadays, Pendennis Castle is a popular tourist attraction, with magnificent views out across the roads to St. Anthony Head Lighthouse, which is open to the public for viewing. Carrick Roads offer plentiful opportunities for the sailors among us without having to venture out on the open sea. Self-drive boats are available for hire at Falmouth, and there's a wealth of inlets and creeks to be explored. On the high tide, it's possible to sail up to the heart of the city of Truro, or out the Tresillian River, but be careful not to be caught on a falling tide. It can be awfully embarrassing to be stuck on a mud bank for hours. What could be better than to cruise upriver and tie up for a spot of lunch at one of the riverside pubs, such as the very attractive Pandora Inn at Restronget, or take a picnic on the banks of one of the tree-fringed creeks. For the dedicated sailing enthusiast, there are a choice of marinas in the area. This Falmouth marina has been recently refurbished and caters fully for the needs of the many families who spend the whole of their summer holiday afloat. Some of the more secluded beaches can only be reached by boat, but there is a plentiful choice in the area with adjacent car parking. Just below the large Falmouth Hotel is a beach full of rock pools for the youngsters to frolic in and explore. Not far away is the sandy beach at Gillingvays, and the other delightful coves of Swanpool and Mainporth just along the coast. Another point of interest in Falmouth is the docks, where large ocean-going ships come for repairs in the dry docks. There are more splendid gardens to enjoy, and all sorts of things happening throughout the season. Just to the south of Falmouth Bay is the entrance to the Helford River, which forms part of the natural boundary to the Lizard Peninsula. Much of the Helford is best explored by boat, as many of the charming creeks are inaccessible by road. From here at Helford Passage, it's possible to take the passenger ferry across the river to Helford Village, nestling amid the lovely wooded scenery. Just upriver from Helford Village is Frenchman's Creek, made famous by another of the late Daphne du Maurier's books. At the head of the navigable part of the river is the picturesque village of GWEEK. With its boatyard and quay, it was an important port back in the 14th century. These days, GWEEK is best known for its seal sanctuary, where seals and other marine life, which have suffered at the hands of winter gales or oil pollution, are brought for attention and care before being returned to the wild. The modest entrance fee goes towards the upkeep of the hospital and saving of the endangered species.
This one here we call Celtic.
On the west coast of the peninsula is the charming harbour of Porthleven. A delightful spot when seen to advantage on sunny summer days, Porthleven featured on national television during the recent winter, when gales of over 100 miles an hour wreaked havoc on the little port's sea defences. To the east of the village are over 2 miles of unbroken beach, which incorporates Low Bar and Low Pool. The Low River meanders up the valley to the old market town of Helston, famous now for its Flora or Furry Day, where the dances through the streets last all day on the 8th of May each year. Nearby is the busy Royal Naval Air Station at Culdrose, where a visitor's viewing area allows the public to watch the almost continuous activity on the airfield. Some days it has more aircraft movements than London's Heathrow. If you're visiting the area in July, it's well worth taking advantage of Culdrose Air Day, with its spectacular exhibitions of helicopter and aircraft flying. No air day would be complete, of course, without a visit by the famous Red Arrows, and Culdrose is the home of the Sharks helicopter display team. Just next door to the airfield is the award-winning Tribble theme park at Flambarts. South, on the cliffs above Poldhu, you'll find a monument to Marconi, just 100 yards from where he sent and received the first ever radio signals across the Atlantic. The field of communications has taken some giant strides since Marconi's day, and not far away, inland on GOONHILLY Downs, we now have the satellite Earth station. Here, communications of all types are sent and received to and from all parts of the world via satellite. It was through GOONHILLY that the first live television pictures were received from the United States via Telstar back in 1962. The variety of rare flora and fauna make the lizard a paradise for the naturalist. The coastal walk offers a total of 36 miles from Porthleven around to the Helford. The pretty port of Coverack was notorious at one time for its smuggling, like so many of the small Cornish harbours. But these days it's an innocent and ideal centre for a holiday on the Lizard. To the south is the smaller harbour of Cadgwith, famous for its impromptu singing sessions of a Friday night in the local hotel. You may be fortunate enough to see the gig racing event, which is held here each year, with gigs and teams from various parts of Cornwall taking part. At Kyne's Cove, the views from the cliffs are truly superb. There's a National Trust car park, and if you wish to visit the beach, it's an invigorating walk of a half a mile or so down to sea level. When the tide is in, there isn't much beach to see, but as the waters recede, they unveil this enchanting spit of sand out to Asparagus Island, with a beach on either side of it. The numerous rocks rising from the sands form natural windbreaks and semi-privacy. But despite the effort needed to get down here, it's a well-favoured spot, and you'll have plenty of company. Just to the south now is Lizard Point itself. The light is one of the most powerful in the world, and the loom can be seen clearly from well over the horizon, which itself is 21 miles away from this height. Souvenirs of this most southerly point can be purchased in the local shops, invariably made from the local serpentine stone. The land north of the Lizard is now popularly known as Poldark country, since the television series set amongst the mining community of Old Cornwall. There's certainly ample evidence of what was once a thriving industry in the masses of old and very picturesque disused engine houses in the area. One of the most attractive beauty spots is Carn Bray, which rears conspicuously out of the landscape to a height of over 700 feet above sea level. The views right across Cornwall from coast to coast would have been a distinct advantage as the Neolithic hill fort which it was some 6,000 years ago. Visible from here is the hump of St Agnes Beacon, snuggling under which is the village of St Agnes itself with its old mining cottages at Stippy Stappy. The local beach is about a mile down the road at TREVOSE, and the remains of what was an attempt to build a protective quay are evidence of the raw energy that the Atlantic storms can sometimes throw into their attack on the coast in these parts. St Agnes is the home of the imaginative model village, which is a must to visit for the children, with its variety of models of Cornwall in miniature and fairy tale settings. Set on the edge of the cliffs to the west of the village is the spectacular Wheal Coats mine. One of the most photographed mine buildings in the county, it's owned by the National Trust, who also have two well-preserved engine houses on show at Poole between Redruth and Camborne. There are some fantastic coastal views along the cliff-top drive west of Portreath, with little laybys in which to park and enjoy the scenery. On this road, a popular stop for the visitor is at Hell's Mouth, for a quick peek over the edge of the sheer 200-foot-high cliffs to the sea below. The graveyard of many unfortunate ships in the past, it was quite recently the scene of a dramatic night rescue by the search and rescue helicopters from Culdrose, when the SS Cecil Japan foundered on the rocks below. Just a little further on, and the motorist can turn off the road onto National Trust land at GODREVY for a close-up view of the lighthouse. A superb spot for a picnic lunch with views across the water to Carbis Bay and St Ives. Visiting St Ives is a bit like being transported to the Mediterranean, with its pastel-coloured cottages and the narrow, twisting, old-world streets. Motor traffic into the town is restricted during the summer, so it's safe to walk around the streets without the hazards of heavy traffic. Each corner turned opens up idyllic scenery which just begs to be committed to a painter's canvas. And its long popularity as a centre for art is easily understood. St Ives has something for everyone, and if you tire of walking the streets with their wealth of souvenirs, search out the Barbara Hepworth Museum, where the famous sculptress lived and worked. Here, in addition to the captivating charm of the tastefully landscaped gardens with the many fine examples of her sculpture, you will find a tranquility in the centre of the bustling town, broken only occasionally by the raucous cries of the seagulls overhead. For a change, there are pleasant walks along the harbour front, where you may hire self-drive boats, take pleasure cruises, or just sit and be entertained by the activities of the children enjoying the fun and the sun of the little beach, or jumping into the cooling waters. There are a choice of beaches in the area, with Carbis Bay just a mile to the south. Porthminster is a popular sheltered cove with fine golden sands. Facing east, it catches the best of the sun in the mornings, as does this pretty little beach at Porthgwydden. For those who prefer the surf, Porthmere to the north of the town is the choice, with more space to stretch out and enjoy the sun. If you haven't brought your own, simple surfboards can be hired for the day, and for the more experienced, Malibu boards are also available. Here there are trampolines for the younger members of the family to work off their excess energy, and the island at the west side of the beach provides the opportunity to stretch your legs and enjoy the views. For truly spectacular views, one should visit the nearby Trencrom Hill, about a mile to the west of Lelant. It's a bit of a climb to get to the top, but well worth the effort when you arrive at this site of an ancient hill fort, built over 2,000 years ago. From here, the views on a clear day extend well up the north coast, across the wide expanse of St. Ives Bay. The south coast is equally visible, the distinctive St. Michael's Mount being easily identified from this viewpoint. Standing just 500 yards off the beach at Marazion, St. Michael's Mount is one of the most legendary and romantic sights of Britain. An island at high tide when it's necessary to take a ferry from the beach to visit this National Trust property. At low tide, it's accessible by the cobbled causeway which links it to the shore. Some of the safest beaches of Cornwall ring Mounts Bay, like this long stretch of sand and shingle at Marazion. Just to the west is the town of Penzance, the terminus of the British rail line from Paddington. Its southerly position and proximity of the Gulf Stream make it the warmest place in Britain. The main street is Market Jew Street, the top of which is dominated by the market house with its pillars, outside of which stands a statue to Sir Humphrey Davy, the inventor of the world-famous miner's safety lamp. Next to Penzance are the fishing harbours of NEWLYN and Mousehole. NEWLYN has the largest fish market in Cornwall, and as well as fishing is famed for its artist community. Mousehole, just 2 miles west of NEWLYN, is a quiet, picturesque little harbour, very popular with the summer sightseers. One of the winter attractions of Mousehole is the intricate display of lights with which the harbour is decorated at Christmas time each year. The lights were turned off in 1981 in respect for the 8 men of the Penlee lifeboat, the Solomon Brown, who tragically lost their lives in a courageous attempt to rescue the crew from the fated cargo ship the Union Star just before Christmas of that year. Along the south coast of the peninsula are many beautiful coves, of which Lamorna is probably the best known. And above Porthcurno, the famous open-air theatre at Minack has been carved out of the top of the cliffs. This corner of Cornwall is famed for its prehistoric remains, like those of Chichester village, and Lanyon Coit, an ancient burial mound which has now become eroded to show the supporting standing stones. Near the north coast is the delightful little village of Zenner, noted for its image of a mermaid carved into a small pew, with its legend concerning the singing of the squire's son, which enticed the mermaid from the sea, and she persuaded him to return with her to live beneath the waves. The mine buildings at Batalic are further evidence of the old Cornish miners' perseverance in claiming the ore from beneath the ground, and in this case from beneath the sea. Sennan Cove is a very popular beach for visitors to this end of the land, and is located only a mile from Land's End itself. Whatever other attractions the visitor to Cornwall might miss, almost everyone makes the pilgrimage to Land's End. There's something magical about this most westerly point of the mainland, where you can stand on the cliffs and see the Scilly Isles on a clear day. Apart from the Scillies, there's nothing between you here and the American continent thousands of miles across the Atlantic Ocean. Land's End is privately owned and has been developed recently to provide a host of attractions to complement the natural, breathtaking scenery, making it a place where the family can happily spend the whole day. Looking out across the stretch of water beyond the Longship's lighthouse, it's not difficult to picture the lost land of Lyonesse, which is said to lie beneath the waves. But that is another story. This film was about a different land, Cornwall.